Hello, welcome to Precon Decon, the video series where I deconstruct the pre-constructed decks of Magic the Gathering's history. In this video, I'm going to be looking at the first of the Stronghold pre-constructed decks. So Stronghold was the set immediately after Tempest, so we're looking at kind of like the late 90s here. So the first deck I'm looking at is Call of the Core, which is a white-black deck, which is a combination I quite like. As you can probably guess, the deck is all about the introduced creature type, the Core, who we know these days from Zendikar and a few other sets, but this is where they first showed up. So here we have the deck list. 21 creatures, 4 instants, 24 lands, 5 sorceries, 6 enchantments, mana curve off to the side here, mostly 1 and 4, sort of like dips a little in the middle and then tops off at 5. Obviously a lot of creatures, so I mean we can sort of guess what the theme here is going to be. Play a lot of creatures, probably control the board with removal, and yeah, win that way. So let's actually look at some of these creatures. So the appeal of this deck, the centerpiece is the core themselves. So what defined the core when they were released was this ability they all had where they could transfer damage from themselves to another creature. We don't have that now on core these days. Usually, like just creatures with the core type don't really necessarily have a mechanic tied to them. Well, the Zendikar ones had sort of an equipment sub thing. They usually had something to do with equipment, but this was kind of like their iconic thing for a really long time. Is if they took damage, you could spend 0 and redirect that damage to another creature you controlled. So, like, I think that's that's a really really good ability. Because it keeps your board safe from effects that deal mass damage. Because say you have 5 core out, and there's a spell that like a pyroclasm that does 2 damage to them. That's fine. You just allocate damage from 4 of them onto one of them, so you only lose like 1 creature. Also makes combat like really difficult for your opponent like to deal with, because you could swing with all your core, they could make a load of blocks, and then you just transfer all the damage onto a creature you don't mind losing, like usually like the nomads, because they're just like a 1/1. What makes it really good is this ability is free. The Shaman Uncore has the ability where you can redirect damage from a creature onto him, and which then he can share out. So it's like a really interesting mechanic. I think it's really good. I used to years ago run a deck that combined all the core with Pestilence. So you'd Pestilence the board, and the core would share out all the damage. They didn't die, but it progressively suit the board. Really unfun probably for my opponents, but I enjoyed it. I think I only played it once or twice because it was quite a fiddly deck to run, but I really enjoyed it. But these are all different sort of sizes, of course. So Nomads are just a 1/1, Warrior Encore is a 2/2, Spirit Encore is a 2/2 flyer, Shaman Encore is a 1/2, and the Lancers Encore I think are a 3/3 a trample. I'm a genius, I've covered it up. But yeah, white creature with trample, which is weird. So there's a few other creatures that like support the core that kind of combo with them. So Knight of Dawn is kind of like one of the big ones. So it can give itself protection from a color of your choice until end of turn. So what you can do with this, like if you're, say you're playing against an opponent using green and they have a load of green creatures, you block them or they block you. You can take all that damage from the core, transfer it into Knight of Dawn, give him protection from green, all that damage goes away. Which is, a pretty good interaction. Cloud Chaser Eagle is just here, like as just a bit of utility. Gravedigger, you're inevitably gonna have something that dies because you just keep transferring damage onto it, so you can get stuff back. A little interesting fact about Gravedigger. Gravedigger, I thought this was the first time it showed up, but it actually showed up in one of the Portal starter sets before it sort of made the jump. It was like it kind of had it is intended for Tempest, but apparently the designers of the Portal starter sets liked it so much they kind of like took it and so like essentially pre-released it, which was kind of funny. I guess the equivalent would be like we used to have like the dual decks where they used to kind of like pre-release cards in those that would then show up like in the next set or something. Screeching Harpy, just a 2/2 with flying, but it has regeneration, sort of similar to Night of Dawn. You can transfer all the core damage onto Screeching Harpy. It's going to die, but then you regenerate it, and it's fine. All the damage goes away. Darkling Stalker, again, same thing. It has regeneration. It also has a pump ability. I think it's a little overcosted, possibly, but 1 mana regeneration is like really, really strong. Regeneration is kind of wonky mechanic. I am kind of glad they've stopped using it nowadays. They just do it gets indestructible and tap it, which is essentially the same thing. I'm going off a little tangent about regeneration. There was a card in I think M14, Tenacious Dead, which was like when it died, you could pay the mana and you'd return it to the battlefield tapped. I think that's would have been like fine to implement that kind of as a keyword going forward as well. But I'm happy with them going indestructible and tapping because it's essentially the same thing as regeneration. Things regeneration is like it's hard to initially understand because it's this thing like you think you have to activate it in response damage. What rules wise you have to do is like you have to preemptively activate it because it's kind of like a replacement thing. Like, oh, if the next time they would die, they don't. It's just very wonky rules wise. That was my tangent about regeneration. Sultara Champion, not quite sure what he's doing. I mean, it's like a fine creature, like a 2/2 with Shadow. I've talked about Shadow in all the Tempest ones. It's basically can block and only blocked by creatures with Shadow, which basically means he can't be blocked and can't block. But when he attacks, all your other creatures get +1/+1 to 10. That's like fine. I think that's a good card. The little asterisk indicates that's one of the rares of the deck. And the other rare is Skeleton Scavengers. This I'm torn on. I think it's like quite a cool design. I mean, but there's no getting away that it comes in and it's a 1/1 for like 3 mana. But it's I think like each time you generate it, it gets stronger. I'm not. I should have checked the Oracle text. This is on me, but I'm not sure if you could just pay the 1 each time and kind of like preemptively buff it up, or like I'm not sure if the Oracle text has changed it so like it only gets the counter if it was going to die and it did regenerate. By the way, I'm not keen on like the regeneration cost going up the stronger it gets. It sort of de-incentivizes you to do it. But then I guess the stronger it gets, the less reason you have to regenerate because it will be tough enough to survive damage. But like it's fine in this. Like it's another regeneration creature that plays in well with all the core spreading damage around. Move on to spells or non-creature spells. So we have just a bunch of removal here. White-black is always like a really good combination for removal. So Dark Banishing destroys non-black creatures, Disenchantment gets rid of artifacts and enchantments, Smite destroys a blocked creature. I actually really like Smite. I think it's been reprinted a few times. I know it's definitely been reprinted in Return to Ravnica. I think it got reprinted in another set, but I can't remember off the top of my head. But I really like Smite. I think it's like 1 white mana to destroy a blocked creature. I think that's just very, very good. And then Deathstroke is destroy a tapped creature. These are all fine. I think these are all perfectly good removal spells for the time. And then some buff spells. So we have Endless Scream, which just the Oracle text of this is actually you put X like scream counters and it gets +1/+1 for every scream counter, because like the way this rules text is edited, it technically doesn't really work. But yeah, it's okay. Enfeeblement, just a good debuff. Obviously strictly worse than Dead Weight, which came out in Innistrad. But yeah, I think this, again, for the time, this would have been fine. It's hard to like look at these cards and kind of, it doesn't feel fair to say they're bad sometimes, because you compare them to cards that have got like 20 years of design philosophy behind them. But I think this would have been fine for the time. And then Flittering Ward, choose color, Enchanted gets protection from the colour, and you can return it to the hand. Again, combos really well with all the core, switching their damage around. It's pretty good. And then Temper, which prevents damage, and for every damage prevented, they get a +1/+1 counter. Again, that's pretty good. Evankar's Justice, so this is where the sweep comes in. So you would play Evankar's Justice, bunch of damage. Oh no, all my core are going to die. Oh no, wait, shuffle all the damage around onto like one guy. It's fine. I lose one guy and they lose everything. Or on something with protection from black. It's, yeah, really good. Evankar's Justice also has buyback, which is this mechanic of the block, where you pay an extra cost when you play the spell, and when you do, it goes back into your hand, so you can cast it again. So pretty big investment for 7 mana to play this and buy it back, but then doing 2 damage to sort of everything is a pretty strong effect to keep being able to repeat, so I think 7 mana is a fine sort of benchmark to have for it. And then Lab Rats, just make a rat token, and it's got buyback. You know, like perfect target for the core damage to be redirected onto. So this is a section I do on every deck. What could have been. So these are. So I just want to say, I think this deck is like pretty strong. I think it would have been really good out of the box. It would have. I think it would have felt like pretty unfair to play against. Like if it was like, say, 2 new players and one of them was using this deck, and they were doing all the damage shifting tricks. Like it would have felt pretty strong. But yeah, I still think there's some things that could have gone in. So Tortured Existence is, I think, a really good card. You just discard a creature card and you get a creature card back into your hand from your graveyard. I think that's very strong. Angelic Protector. So this was. So I'll just preface this by saying, when I say this what could have been section, my goal is to like only say what could have been from cards like in the same set as the Precon was released. But for this one, I like couldn't refuse including Angelic Protector because it's such a good combo with the core, where because the core's redirection ability targets, when you target the Angelic Protector, it gets +0/+3, so it's going to survive that 1 damage you put on, and that was like at the heart of the deck I used to run with like core and pestilence and this, so it just meant Angelic Protector could just not die. It also serves a really good blocker if you've got a core out, because like the core doesn't need to be damaged to use that ability. You can just pay 0 and target it like infinite times to like make its toughness absurdly high. And there's obviously there's quite a few things you can combo with that. But I can understand why it wasn't here, because that is it's not an instant win, but it's a very difficult thing to interact with. And then Hero's Resolve and Conviction. I just put these in because these are auras that like buff up toughness. So again, would have synergized quite well with core shuffling damage around. You just put it on a creature, and then it can absorb more of the damage that's shuffled around. So in summary, yeah, I think this deck would have been like really strong. I mean, like looking at it on paper compared to the other decks, which we're going to look at in future videos, this one kind of seems head and shoulders above the others. It's just got like a really good selection of cards. Everything seems to interact really nicely with each other. And I can sort of back that because I have played kind of like a refined version of this deck. But out of the box, I think it still would have been really strong. But what do you think? I mean, did you ever have this deck? Have you ever played with the original core where they shuffle damage? Stick a comment below, and yeah, we'll see. I'm interested to see what people think about this deck specifically. But yeah, I'll be back next time, and I'll be looking at another one of the Stronghold pre-constructed decks. Thank you for listening.